Okay, here's one more PowerPoint to help you out with your problem solution essay or the Moz proposal essay if you're in the STEM classes, designed to be useful for either section. Really only two main points to this presentation. First point, we're actually going to do some exercises like play along at home, and we'll practice some lateral thinking in kind of a workout style. And then I'm going to look at an actual case study. So in case you're wondering what might all of this be useful for in the real world, I will try to make a case for practical application of creative problem solving. If you're trying to get the benefits from this mini lesson, definitely encouraging you, as I said, to play along at home. And in this case, I'm going to allow you to submit your scratch paper. So if you actually play along, do the exercises, you could submit that, take a picture with your phone if you handwrite it, or you can type these answers and submit them to me, and you get yourself a 10-point homework credit. Before we get into the actual exercises, I can tell from some of your emails that you're catching on to an important contradiction in creativity or thinking outside the box. There's kind of a paradoxical element here. You can see from the cartoon, I'm telling you to let the rules go, and here are the rules as to how you should let the rules go. There is kind of an inherent contradiction in talking about outside the box thinking, but within certain parameters. So as we go through the exercises, I'm going to try to make some points about how to reconcile that potential contradiction. If that sounds like a bit much, though, trying to reconcile the inherent contradictions and paradoxical nature of creativity and action, if that's a little too heady or a little too philosophical, we can strip it down. The main 2 points of this presentation are answering these two questions. What the hell is the point of this paper anyway? And more importantly, why does any of this matter in the real world? My first answer to that question is this guy right here, not this beautiful Greek man here who's a very good friend of mine, been my bassist for 15 years, not this Ukrainian over here who doesn't speak a word of English, who was my drummer for the same 15 years and probably has a mafia hit on him, but I'm talking about this guy right here, one of my all-time favorite people in the entire world, and my father. The reason I'm saying he's a potential answer to the question, why does any of this matter, is because by the end of this video, I'm going to claim that he would not be here on the planet Earth and alive were it not for creative problem solving. As we go through the actual exercises themselves and you're following along, if you're asking yourself, what the hell could possibly be useful about this, by the end of the presentation, I'm actually going to go as far as to claim that my dad, my best friend in the entire world, is still alive and here on the planet Earth today as a result of creative problem solving and lateral thinking. I'm recording this during the COVID-19 plague times, so in case it's a little extra motivation as we go through the exercises, as you progress through the lesson, I am in fact going to make the case that lateral thinking has the potential to keep the people that we love not dead. All right, let's get into this. If you haven't already, go grab your writing implements and let's actually practice some creative problem solving techniques in real time. To get back to my horribly overused workout and training metaphor, if you want to, you could think of these specific lateral thinking exercises as difficult yoga poses. You're trying to literally stretch your brain. And just like with yoga, if you're doing it right, it might be uncomfortable. You may feel pretty awkward and weird as your brain tries to confront these difficult stretches. Some of you may have already started engineering a plan, like, can I just watch the entire video, go back and write down nothing but the right answers, and just submit that as a homework credit? Yeah, you sure can. You sure can do that. That's the equivalent of doing 2 jumping jacks, recording that, putting it on a loop, and then sending it to me and saying, look, I did 100 jumping jacks. You know, if you take the time, you're going to get the points. You're just cheating yourself out of the benefits. All right, deep breath. Here's the first actual exercise in our circuit. This one seems simple, but take some time with this. This is the exact same exercise when we were brainstorming topics for the problem solution essay. It's the exact same process as when we brainstormed solutions for the essay. The idea is to just create as many examples as you can. So again, this one sounds simple. It's just list as many objects with wheels as you can think of. Take as much time as you need, and again, to belabor the workout metaphor, you're trying to push yourself to failure or just past that. So you're going to come up with 5 or 10 objects very quickly that have wheels. Just make sure you get 3 to 5 past where your brain hits a wall, where you just run out of things that you could think of that have wheels. Just push yourself past that. No right or wrong answers. The point is go for as many examples as you can come up with. So pause the video right now and literally just list as many things with wheels as you can. Okay, count them up, see how many answers you came up with. Again, there's no right or wrong answers here. This is basic brainstorming, just about coming up with as many ideas as possible. So let me walk you through the chart. Chances are most of you got the basics. You said cars, you said bicycles, you said scooters. These would all kind of be the first layer. Your brain can reach these the most directly. So of course you got to write them down, and that's good. That gets the brain initially worked up. But then if you had any from the middle column, I'd say that's a little bit more lateral and your brain has to stretch a little bit further. So you may not have thought of hamsters originally because hamsters don't physically have wheels, but there is such a thing as a hamster wheel. Or maybe you wouldn't have initially thought of wagons because we just don't encounter those in daily life. So your brain just has to go a little bit further, a little bit more lateral to come up with those examples. The right-hand column, though, I would describe as divergent thinking. Your brain really would have to jump the tracks and make a leap to go from cars and trucks and baby strollers have wheels to gears are also wheels. So that would be an example of a wheel, but it's a different concept or it's a different application. Or if you were really good and you know that cheese comes in wheels when you first buy like a big block of cheese, like $180 worth of Munster, it will come in a wheel as well, but that requires the biggest leap. Your brain has to make the biggest stretch to get to that divergent thinking. So divergent thinking is all about how far outside the box you can get, right? Literally how far you can stretch your brain. But with the wheels example, there's a point where that can almost get ridiculous. So for instance, you might say, well, the planet is kind of a wheel, and we're in a giant wheel called the solar system. And isn't that just one wheel inside the giant wheel called the universe, man? That's fine for your poetry class. That's very lateral thinking, but that's not going to help you with your engineering degree. So unless you're planning on being a celestial poet, you'll probably want to think of this as a two-step process. The first step is the creativity, the lateral thinking, the willingness to be completely divergent and get as far outside the box as you can. But ultimately, you want to be able to bring that around to a real world situation because you'll have to apply this creativity in a way where there will, in fact, be right or wrong answers or real problems to solve. So for this next exercise, there is an X to solve for. So the next few questions, you have to use the creativity, but you're using it to get to an actual correct answer. So this next exercise is actually based on a real cognitive assessment called the Remote Associations Test. And you might see this in a psychology context. So I'm going to just talk you through this as an example first. You don't have to write anything down yet. And then I'll give you 2 examples to try to work out on your scrap paper. So here's the premise. You've got 3 concepts, and you're trying to use lateral thinking to create one word or one bridge concept that could tie the 3 together. So let me literally go step by step. Think about the word mouse and just do the lateral association. I think of mouse and I immediately think of cats because they tend to go together. Or I think of mouse and I immediately think of trap because mousetrap was what we talked about last class. Or I think of mouse and I think of cheese because mice are always eating cheese in cartoons. Next, you want to do the exact same thing with the concept of sharp. So you just try to let your brain free associate, use some lateral thinking. I would think immediately of things like knives or scalpels. Then maybe I get to intelligence. Somebody, if they're described as being very sharp, they're described as being very quick or very intelligent. What else do I got? There's a sharp fall or a sharp drop off. Sharp end of the stick. Okay, I guess trying to put as many examples or as many concepts together, just trying to loosen up, limber up, and make as many associations as possible. And of course, you just run the exact same program again with the third concept. Free associate, use that lateral thinking. Let's see, I think of blue, I think of cool colors. It's a cool or cold color. It reminds me of sadness. If somebody's blue, they're sad. It's my favorite color. That's the first thing I think of when I think of blue. Jokes can be blue, right? If there's a blue joke, it means it's a dirty joke or it's in poor taste. And then you try to start looking for connections. You try to see if there's any one of those concepts that might bridge all three together. So then you can literally just start playing with this like a formula. So let's see, if I think blue means sad, maybe somebody was sad because they were stabbed with a sharp knife by a mouse. That doesn't sound right. I don't think we're there yet in terms of connections. And this is a key moment. You have to push your brain a little bit further and figure, all right, you haven't quite created enough lateral connections yet. So if I kept going with blue, let's see, favorite color, it's calming, reminds me of sadness. I like blue cheese. Oh, wait a minute. Cheese can be blue. Cheese can also be sharp. And of course, mice like cheese. So cheese is your bridge element. So remote associations are exactly what they sound like. They're you taking three separate concepts, creating an association or a connection that is very lateral, that requires your brain to do that little extra stretching. All right, try this one on your own. Get your scrap paper, pause the video right now, and just take as long as you want trying to create a lateral connection between these three words: widow, bite, and monkey. Pause the video, take as long as you want. So if you haven't guessed it, the correct answer is spider. I'll unpack that and explain the connection in case it's not obvious. But just in case your adrenaline got spiked a little bit on the previous slide, just full disclosure, wanted to let you know that I forgot I put that in there, and when that slide popped up, I almost fell out of my chair just now because I'm a pretty significant arachnophobic myself. So apologies for that. Here's the breakdown. So once you know the answer, it's usually pretty easy to retro-engineer the connections, but just so it's obvious. Spider, obviously, a black widow is one of the most famous spiders ever. We know that spiders are very bitey. And this one is the tricky one. This one actually requires the most lateral thinking. You'd have to have the knowledge base that there is a kind of monkey called spider monkeys, and your brain would also have to make the connection between a spider monkey that has the word spider in the name and the fact that spiders also bite, and that black widow is a variety of spider. So your brain would have to stretch the most to get to the spider monkey example. This is another version of the exact same problem. So try this one out on your scrap paper. I promise there's no scary images at the end of this one, but take as long as you want, pause the video, and see if you can create some kind of a bridge concept or a single word that could connect these three words: sweat, sore, and shoulder. So I'm not going to go through the answer for that last example, partly because I'm curious to see what you come up with when you send it in. Of course, you could spend 11 seconds on Google to get the answer. But see if you can come up with something, send it along for that homework credit. Third exercise, I'm going to call hacking the question. So this kind of will remind you of some brain teasers and puzzles you've seen in the past. And you could call them trick questions, but I'll explain why I don't really like that as the term. So here's one example of what I mean by hacking the question. You could describe this as a trick question, but this example in particular makes a point about coming at the question from a new way or from a new angle, or trying to turn the question around so that you can see the question is misleading. It's designed to look like one kind of question, but it's actually asking something totally different. So go ahead and actually try this one as a written exercise. I'd recommend rewriting these numbers on your scrap paper, and I'm literally just going to ask you to solve for x. There is a correct answer, but let me give you two hints. The first hint, if you're not a math person, you should still be able to solve for this. You don't have to be a math expert to arrive at the correct answer. And the second hint is the question is designed to be misleading, right? The question is deliberately inviting you to come at the question from different angles. So pause right now and write these numbers down and literally see if you can solve for x. And this is your 5-second warning. If you pause the video another few seconds, I'll give you the answer. And let me just prepare you to potentially be a little annoyed, have a little groan come out of you when you see the answer. So here's the solution to the problem. I was trying to give you hints when I said you have to come at the problem from different angles. You literally have to turn the problem upside down for it to work, because then you suddenly see, oh, 86, 88, 89, 90, 91. It's literally just numbers in sequence. So 87 is the correct answer, and that's what you'd need to solve for. And again, this is a visualization of inverting the question, where the question looks like it's asking one thing. You have to literally come at the question from a different angle. All right, let's try another one. This is another example of a question that has to be hacked. And by that, I mean the question looks like it's asking one thing, and you have to use lateral thinking and a creative approach to kind of outsmart the question. So this exercise reads like a riddle. So here's the actual question that you're going to try to answer. I am the beginning of the end and the end of time and space. I am essential to creation and I surround every place. What am I? I don't want to give you too many hints for this one. I want you to just try to scratch out some ideas on your own. But I will tell you that you could answer this correctly in one sentence or less. So it doesn't have to get philosophical or too in-depth. And the only other hint is what I've been saying. This is a question that needs to be hacked. It needs to be outsmarted to get to the correct answer. So pause right now. Take as long as you want to try to answer this riddle. If you're like me, you got this question wrong because you wanted to go philosophical. So when I first confronted this question, I was thinking things like gravity or the universe or God. I actually had a chance to teach a simplified version of this lesson to a room full of first graders, and a boy in the back raised his hand, big frown on his face, and said, I think the answer is death. First of all, he would do great in my Russian literature class. And second of all, those are all examples of misreading the question. If you're like me and you wanted to go philosophical, that actually makes it harder to outsmart the question. So if you didn't already get the correct answer, just stare at this slide for like 10 seconds, because this is the decoded version. I accidentally used some Christmas colors to try to reveal or hack the question so you could visualize it. So you notice things like, okay, well, there's an E highlighted in that word, there's an E here. Oh, now I get it. And there's an E on this side of every and an E on that side of place. So E surrounds every place. Here's an E that the word creation needs to be the word creation. And eventually your brain gets it and you say, okay, now I see that the letter E is the correct answer to this riddle. If you found that last question a little irritating, like once you found out the answer, you were a little annoyed, that's totally okay. That's the exact same annoyance and frustration that you might feel if you're not able to touch your toes yet. This is your first time to yoga in a long time, and you're not going to go from sedentary to being able to be Cirque du Soleil levels of flexible in one session. So that's totally fine. All right, we're going to try one more exercise before we actually look at the real world case study and see if you could solve the real world problem that kept my dad out of the ground all of this time. So this is called Numbers Nightclub. This is a scenario that combines lateral thinking, logic, and also hacking a misleading question. So you're trying to combine all the tactics we've been practicing so far. Okay, here's your setup. A guy wants to get into a nightclub. There's bouncers outside the door, and they're testing each person before they let them into the club. He's not sure what the bouncers are testing for, so he hangs back a while, he watches, and he tries to look for patterns. And he notices the first thing that happens is a woman walks up to the bouncers. The bouncers don't say anything except 6. And the woman replies with 3. She's allowed to go into the club. He watches for a little bit longer, sees a little guy come up, and the bouncers say 12. The man replies with 6, and they let that little guy into the club as well. I always recommend gathering more data than just 2 case studies, but after the 2 examples, he thinks he's got the pattern, so he marches up to the bouncers. As he approaches, the bouncers say 4, and the man replies with 2, and they say absolutely not. They shut him down, they throw him back in the street, and he just wanders home alone and dejected. So 2 is the incorrect answer. The question is, what is the correct answer? What should the man have said to be allowed into the nightclub? So pause the video right here and just take as long as you want. You can go back a few frames, try to revisit the question. And again, you're trying to use lateral thinking to hack the question and come up with the correct answer. So the correct answer is 4, and if you got it, I'm impressed. I totally did not get the answer to this question the first time I was confronted with it. I was so hung up on misreading the question, I was totally unable to hack it. So nice work. If you got it, I'm not going to give you the explanation. If you want to use the answer now that you know it's 4 and try to retro-engineer the question and come up with an explanation, I'd accept that as part of the homework. Or you can spend 12 seconds on Google to figure out the explanation as well. Okay, enough with these puzzles and these drills and these brain teasers. Time to look at a real-world case study. And it's important to note that this isn't just a real-world situation. It is a case where everything you were just practicing in the little drills and puzzles and brain teasers, but applied to a very serious, very real-world situation. This little squid monster on the right-hand side is a cancer cell. I think it's a lung cancer cell, but it doesn't matter. It's an evil little cancer cell either way. So the last problem that I'm going to give you to solve in this little mini lesson is legitimately cancer. And it's in particular a certain kind of tumor that's difficult to deal with. And your final problem-solving exercise is going to be based on the technology that I set you up with. Could you create a way to deal with that tumor? Now don't forget, this is all based on an actual real-world situation, but I'm going to try to give you a simplified version, and based on these variables, see if you could use some lateral divergent thinking to come up with a creative convergent solution. And in this case, there is a right or wrong answer. The right answer is your patient lives. The wrong answer is your patient does not live. So creativity, yes, but an actual solution that is very concrete in nature. Your patient either lives or dies. So here's your setup. You've got a ray gun on the right-hand side of the screen that shoots a laser that kills cancer. Your cancer-killing laser gun has 10 settings. So you imagine that these are power settings. 1 obviously is the weakest, 5 represents 50%, and the limitations of the technology is it only slows cancer growth on settings 1 through 9, and you have to turn it all the way up to 10 to actually kill the cancer. So the only way the gun successfully kills the tumor is if you turn it all the way up to a 10. So you know you have access to these ray guns that can kill tumors when they're set to a 10, and for the sake of the riddle, try to imagine that you have a patient with a really stubborn tumor that's nestled in the organs in such a way that it's difficult to get to. And you also know that it's a serious one. If untreated, this tumor will be fatal to the patient. So your job is just to try to utilize this technology, such as it is with its limitations, to try to cure your patient's tumor. So immediately you should see the crux of the problem, the reason why this problem is difficult. Since the tumor is nestled in amongst the other organs, you don't want to turn the laser all the way up to the 10 because that will go straight through the patient. So you might start and hope, well, maybe I can just zap the tumor multiple times at a 9. That does not work. As I said, you'll slow the tumor, but ultimately, in the end, the tumor is still going to win and your problem won't be solved because you didn't save your patient. You know that you can turn your ray gun up to a 10 and that will successfully kill the tumor, but unfortunately, the whole conundrum here is that if you do that, it will not only kill the tumor, it will punch through all the surrounding tissue, it'll come right out the other side of the patient, and it will kill the patient. So while you've succeeded in solving the problem of the tumor, you've also created a new problem, which is a dead patient. So the actual problem is, the actual question, and this is the last exercise of the video, is could you come up with, based on this technology, a way to utilize this technology to kill the tumor, but not kill the patient? Don't forget this is all based on an actual real situation. Of course, you could research it and find out how the scientists use lateral thinking and creative problem solving to hack the problem, but try it on your own. Just be willing to stretch and see how far you get, and you're going to get credit whether you're right or wrong, so don't be afraid of being wrong. But as you understand it, could you use this technology as a way to, for instance, solve my dad's tumor? Go ahead and put 1 or even 2 or 3 theories down on your scrap paper. Again, you just take a picture of all of your writing exercises, or if you were typing them, you can send me that, and I'll give you that 10-point homework credit. If you just can't wait, if you have to know the answer right now, there's a YouTube link that I'll post right here, so you can find out once you've put the effort in to come up with your own possible solution, which I definitely got wrong. Then you can go ahead and find out how they actually cured my dad's cancer, and that's why he's here today. So just to close us out, just like with a real workout, you might feel a little haggard, a little fatigued, and you may not notice any amazing improvements, but you'd want to be doing something like this over a long period of time. So this one workout isn't going to make you be able to touch your toes if you couldn't ahead of time, but you're that much closer than you were if you hadn't gone through the motions. And what did we learn? What was the point of this whole little exercise? Next time somebody says to you something along the lines of, what's with all this creativity and your open-mindedness and your lateral thinking? What the hell good are any of those? You now have a 3-word answer to that. That gets us to the end of this mini lesson. I think I mentioned last round that these are way harder and more time intensive than I thought they'd be, but I appreciate it if you stuck it out for 25 plus minutes, put some of your thoughts on paper, send those to me. You're going to get yourself a homework credit. Otherwise, as always, take care of yourselves out there in the kaleidoscope of chaos, as I call it. So be good to each other. Self-care is real. It's a thing. For now, I am out. Email with questions as always.